permettre d'aller vers la durabilité de tout ce qu'on va essayer d'implémenter. Merci tout le monde et merci Léna pour l'animation. Merci.
Merci beaucoup Lubna pour ces mots très importants à garder pendant tout ce hackathon. Et thank you so much Lubna. So now I'm going to introduce our opening speaker, Professor Yoshua Bengio. Although he needs no introduction, I'm going to just give a quick overview. So he's recognized worldwide as one of the leading experts in AI. He's mostly well known for his work in deep learning, and in 2018 he earned the Turing Award, which is the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in Computing, along with Yann, LeCun and Geoffrey Hinton. He's a full professor at Université de Montréal and the founder and scientific director of Mila, Quebec AI Institute. He co-directs the CIFAR Learning in Machines and Brain program as senior fellow, and he acts as scientific director of IVADO. In 2022, he became the most cited computer scientist in the world. He's a fellow of both the Royal Society of London and Canada. He's the Knight of Legion of Honor of France and an officer of the Order of Canada. Member of the UN Scientific Advisory Board for independent advice on breakthroughs in science and technology since very recently in 2023, and the Canada CIFAR AI Chairs. So as his student, and many of his students think the same, Yoshua has been the first one to support this initiative, and we're very grateful for that. And we feel very lucky to have a professor who cares a lot about the impact of AI in the real world and who really wants to make a difference and a positive change in this society. So Yoshua, the floor is yours.
Merci Léna. Merci à tous ceux qui sont ici. Thanks everyone for being here and giving your time for an important cause. Actually, I want to start by talking about something fairly fundamental, like philosophy 101 or something, but that's relevant to AI. So what are we doing with all the technology we're designing and bringing into the world? Well, we can basically use it as a powerful tool. And the question is, what do we do with that power? So there are two like natural human instincts here. One is we can help others, and the other is we can help ourselves. And yeah, of course, we need to help ourselves sufficiently to be able to help others as well. But in our society, it can, also be a very strong tendency to accumulating more wealth and more power. And it's not good for democracy. It's not good for the well-being of everyone on this planet. So when there are events like today, I think we can appreciate how good it feels to contribute to something outside of us. I think really that people underestimate how much value it has to be engaged in commitments like this, and not just value to the rest of the world, but how important it is to do something that makes you feel good, that makes you feel like, honestly, you're doing your best to contribute to society and humanity. There's no replacement for that, really. So I'm trying to tell you, you're doing all this not just for Morocco and other events, natural disasters that unfortunately happen, but for yourself in some like tricky way that many people don't understand. All right, now let me talk about the AI side of things. So there's a segue here, which is how, where is money invested in AI in our society? And for many, many years, I've been kind of shouting that governments need to invest in the applications of AI that may not be profitable, but have a lot of value to society. I've been involved in research in applying AI to helping with climate change, healthcare, drug discovery, helping to deal with problems we have with gender discrimination, race discrimination, and in general, it's been difficult. The way our society is organized, really, we see the vast majority of the funds going to projects that are immediately profitable to corporations. Unfortunately, things like the well-being of those that are worse off in our society is not usually well taken care of by this system. And unless we completely change our economic system, which would be interesting to consider, but probably not realistic in the short term, there is a way to at least mitigate this, which is through the commitment of governments. And in particular, I think that governments should be investing a lot more in academic research and nonprofit research to apply technologies like AI to deal with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, including disaster relief. So I went from the personal to the political, and now maybe I'm gonna shift a little bit to the scientific. So I'm a machine learning researcher, as you know, and how can machine learning help with many of these challenges? In many ways. In 2019, we put out a paper on AI for tackling climate change. And really, one of the lessons there is there's no silver bullet. We can apply AI in a vast diversity of areas where it can help. And I think here it's going to be true today with this hackathon and many other areas. It'd be nice if we find like the killer app that saves the world or something. But, well, the reality is more complicated usually. So how can machine learning help? And by the way, here, it's not just machine learning. I know many of you are coming with diversity of backgrounds. In the case of Morocco, it's obvious that logistics is a crucial ingredient, which could involve some predictive components with machine learning, but also operations research and many other aspects. In fact, in general, that's another lesson from the climate change paper. The AI people can't solve these problems by themselves. It's always a collaboration with many different expertise, many different people, many different points of views. And we have to have a bit of humility to really accept our ignorance and work with people who know better than us in other areas. So, okay, so what about monitoring natural disasters? There is one of the early amazing advances in deep learning came about a bit more than a decade ago with neural nets that really did a good job in computer vision tasks, and it has continued to improve. So we can take data that has spatial structure. I mean, it could be satellite images or any kind of other spatially organized measurements. And that will typically be the case when we have disasters. So the spatial structure of the data could be images, but it doesn't have to be. It could be asynchronous measurements. So for example, Usama, whom I don't see, but was there earlier. Oh, in the back, hiding. Worked in an area where there's a lot of papers using neural nets for analyzing images, but one of the particular directions that he looked at, which I think is quite important in situations like this, is the data isn't always a nice, coming in a nice regular grid. You may have point-wise measurements at different locations. So how do you organize the neural net architectures to be able to deal with that kind of data? And I want to mention another project that deals with spatial data. The students I've been working with are looking at many different kinds of data. So this is another of the nice advances that deep learning has enabled in the last decade, which is people call like multi-sensor data. So you can have different types of data, and they might correspond to measurements not all at the same place, for example, or in time it might also be asynchronous. We may have some data, some particular modality for some period in some places, and then other data in other places. So how do we take advantage of these different sources of data? And nowadays, there's been a lot of progress in deep learning architectures. We moved from the early MLPs and ConvNets from the early days, that it's actually quite feasible to do that. So one of the really key ingredients here that's being used by Nassim Rahman, who's my student who's been working on this, is taking advantage of attention mechanisms. Right? So neural nets with attention can deal with very irregular, arbitrary data structures as input. Oh, okay. So the idea is actually neural nets with attention you can think of the input in the most general way. You can think of the input as a set. So think, for example, if the input was an image, you can think of the set as a set of pixel location, pixel value pairs. But that's just an example. Now you can see how you could take a set of measurements at different points in space and time and different types of values. It becomes very easy once you think of the data as a set to handle pretty much any kind of data. It doesn't have to be very regular. It can be mixing all kinds of variables. Yeah, that's really an insight that helps to manage not nice data that we may have been used to in simpler or older projects. What else? Maybe I'm going to use the time that's left to answer questions that some of you may have. So there's a microphone here. If people want to ask me anything, I'm happy to try to give an answer.
I don't yet have a well-baked question, but just to get it started.
Let's improvise together.
Yeah. You were talking about sets, the
Yes.
last part, right? Which I agree, it helps a lot to think of the data in any kind of structure to how can we give it as an input to a neural network. But when we have sets like that, you say, okay, an image can be a pixel value and the pixel location. Then how can we take advantage of the inductive biases of the
Yes.
structure that is intrinsic to the data when
Yes.
we sort of scramble? So I don't know, just drop it there, maybe to brainstorm together, like what are ideas to.
Yes, of course,
still
of
take
course.
advantage of
I talked about the particulars of the input, but often in a specific domain, there is domain expertise, maybe coming from physics or logistics, or we may have all kinds of extra sources of information that we can exploit. And there's a very rich area of research right now in what people call AI for science, where in addition to some of the tricks I mentioned, people will exploit some of the properties. Some of the things that are old are things like translation invariance in time and space, but you can have many more physical invariances. You could have, Alex has been working, for example, in modeling of chemical entities where there are things we know about the way crystals form and so on. And depending on the area, you can take advantage of that in the design of these neural net or other kinds of solutions. But connecting to what I said earlier, usually you're not going to figure it out all by yourself. You have to really spend a lot of time talking to experts. That may, for them, it might be obvious, and you just don't know. So that dialogue is very important. Thanks for the question, Alex.